career doing innovation and thinking about what's next. I started out working for Dr. Henry Kissinger, who was Secretary of State under President Nixon, and then went to business school, and then was hired to think about what's next for companies. And that was the heyday of the internet. And we were trying to figure out what it would look like, what the future would look like. There was Second Life, there were CD-ROMs, which were like super hot, and it was an exciting time. So fast forward, I moved to Asia, courtesy of the Henry Luce Foundation, and started doing things in Asia, which was again on the cusp of so much change. China was growing by leaps and bounds. I was in the startup world and venture capital. Ultimately went back to corporate at Financial Times and continued to do the kind of what's next, where's media going, how are consumer preferences changing, and ultimately that turned into the Future-Proof Lab, which helps companies and individuals figure out their inspiring futures that matter.
Brilliant. So you said you moved to Asia. Did you move to Hong Kong directly, or when did you get to Hong Kong? How did you get here?
So yeah, I was supposed to go to China and start a print magazine about the internet.
Oh wow!
Wow,
In 1999. So
that's incredible.
But ended up not doing it because the joint venture fell through, and I ended up in Hong Kong, and about 2 weeks later met my husband. So it was all divine intervention. So I've been here 25 years.
Fantastic. And how have you seen the city change across time from a futurist perspective?
I've been thinking about this a lot because the kind of dialogue around the future and futurists is very often North American or from Europe, or has been in the past, starting with Shell Oil. And there haven't been as many Asian voices, and there haven't been as many voices from China. At the same time, China is such a perfect place to lead in foresight futures because it's got huge long time horizons. It's sort of the 5,000-year time horizon. A lot of the things that China does are incredibly long-term and strategic. So while it's not as marketed as other places, I feel like there's a lot of futures thinking in Hong Kong and in China, and really coming up in Asia. Across Asia, so much of the youth dividend and the GDP growth is shifting towards Asia right now. So I imagine that will be a hot place for the dialogue around futures to continue.
Good.
I'm really excited and optimistic about almost all new technology.
Me too.
So personality-wise, it's fun, it's exciting, and I've also seen enough and gotten excited about enough that hasn't gone well that I do understand, that not everything will flourish the way that we have been promised. I think AI is a game changer. It feels, from my perspective, especially as an American here in Hong Kong, like it's our generation's space race. Like we are all going for it. Different companies, different countries, and it's going to fundamentally change the way we work and the way we live and the way that the next generation is educated. So in one sense, I think as the space race did, exciting. It gives you a sense of being part of an epic journey. But I do also have concerns because there are so many things that we enjoy, from the phone to social media to all the access, that as a society we didn't think that much about, and which has had a lot of negative kind of human impacts. And I would love it if there was an opportunity for us to think through those and maybe do it better this time. So specifically people being dislocated from work, really the possibility that we won't be able to do as much as we hoped, that as one cartoon I saw said, the AI will do all the interesting stuff and we'll just be doing the boring things we had hoped to offload, as opposed to the opposite, which is what I hope and believe will be true.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting concept.
I do think there should be governance, and we have precedent. We have agreed not to go fully ahead with super babies and genetic mutations, and that's been a global agreement. It's been challenged with CRISPR babies in China, but there was broad censure from other people because we as a human species agreed that we didn't want to go there, because we saw the implications of people being able to genetically engineer human beings, with enough money to be great, and the rest of humanity falling behind, until we could figure out the best way to govern that. So I do think there should be governance. I do think there is an inclination for people to feel like it will stop progress. And I think in work, even, if you think about in the past we had Machiavellian characters that would, there were no rules and people would just have to obey whatever the whims were of the king. And then we went into bureaucracies, and that was rules and governance. And now I feel like we're going towards something that is more distributed. So we're thinking about what are the rules and the ideas that we all can subscribe to that will allow us to go forth. So I don't necessarily think that we should have some kind of top-down governance or even some kind of United Nations-based AI governance, but agreeing on certain principles would be very useful. So I have ideas about where I feel the future will go. And I think that generative AI and AI more broadly have been creating the conditions for some of what I believe will be in the future. I think we'll go more towards voice activated. So if you think about, I have 3 children, so I think a lot about education and how they're educated, and I do a lot of research in the future of work. My first book was called Future Proof: Reinventing Work in an Age of Acceleration, so that whole idea of how work changes is meaningful to me. I believe that we will walk down the street and have conversations about what drives our curiosity, rather than textbooks that require us to memorize them and regurgitate them for text. I can imagine a future where my personal AI assistant can answer questions, can do that deep research for me about maybe where things are headed and synthesizing information where my curiosity is the fuel, and my ideas, that messy human instinct to go down rabbit holes, can be matched with this interactive conversation with all the information that is available through all of the decades of time that we have spent on the internet, putting the research papers there, and even our social media conversations and work conversations and magazines and newspapers. And I think that's really exciting. So it's not one piece of technology, it's the way they all come together to interact specifically with human beings.
Fascinating.
So in the last 10 years in Hong Kong, we have experienced this really quiet revolution in automation. And whereas before we thought about robots as this kind of crazy idea of robot armies or Terminator, bit by bit, you have seen all over the city automated kiosks at McDonald's with touchscreens, little robots that go around all of the malls that clean the floors, that have cute little eyes, automated dish clearing robots that are in all the restaurants, vending machines, which I think of as robotics, in the mall near my house, Cyberport. So there's so many aspects, where we're starting to just see them as a piece of the furniture, so to speak. And that is something that I've really noticed. And that's just the kind of, in the last few years, the consumer or social evolution of, having robots be commonplace. Of course, on an industrial level, for far longer, we've had in Asia a huge robotics, I don't know if I would call it a renaissance, but huge growth in robotics, industrial robotics. And I think that it's a convergence of the fact that it's a great manufacturing hub. You have also the aging populations in certain countries in Asia, like Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, China. So you have people, one of my friends who was the CEO at one of the ports in Hong Kong said, I would love to hire more people, but the average age of a forklift driver is 55. So we have to automate. And so that kind of industrialization, the robotics, with the aging population, and then of course the pandemic, which made dark factories much safer, created this confluence of events where industrial robotics became important. Socially, people are starting to think of robotics as commonplace. On the care side, which I think is really interesting, it's been more of a mixed bag. So Japan had its robotic seal that they put into aging homes, and I think they've done that a bit in the US as well, where we thought that that could be the stopgap, right? We're having fewer babies, we're having an aging population who's going to take care of us as we age. And the reality is that robotics needs that sort of second layer to make sure that it's all working, that there's a human in the loop. So So sometimes that's an issue, and I've heard that in some of the care homes that it was human beings were spending more time trying to figure out how to schedule and maintain and restore the robot when things went wrong. So it hadn't worked out as we had hoped. Meanwhile, we have a sort of humanoid robot revolution that seems to be happening in the media, which has been happening for a long time, but this year it's 2025, and all of a sudden I've noticed a lot of people talking about humanoid robots. Here in Hong Kong, Sophia, was on the scene. I don't know, I think she's 10 or 12 now. And I did a panel with Sophia in November last year, and everybody said there's no way humanoid robots will ever be a part of the fabric of society. And one of the guys on my panel said that we could never accept Sophia because she doesn't look like us. And it made me laugh because it was a summit put on by a Japanese tech company, and every single person in the entire conference was an Asian man, except for me and Sophia. And so I said, actually, Sophia looks a lot more like me than every other person at this conference. So what does that mean for the future? So what do I think in 2050? I think that robots, they're already commonplace. I think that there will be humanoid robots. They won't even be interesting anymore, maybe. I think in 2050, I will probably be close to being in a care home, and I can imagine so much more automation. I can, there's a lot to play for. I want everything to be seamless in my perfect little pod so that I can spend all of my time connecting with my grandchildren and other human beings, and I won't have to do a lot of the things that I now have to do in terms of thinking about my schedule, and it'll all just be a lot more automatic. I feel like I am working for that renaissance to happen because I know that human beings have the opportunity to be better humans, but it seems like we never have time. We're under so much pressure. The opportunity for us to spend time with each other, really connect, have conversations, build things better, have opportunity for imagination and creativity, and flourishing. That is the renaissance that I'm working towards. And it is happening in small ways all over the world. There's the former chief scientist from one of the insurance companies who has looked through to figure out human flourishing. And I'm fascinated by how technology is enabling us to understand ourselves better so that we can have better lives, really play to our strengths. We don't really have that much time to have better conversations, have better interpersonal dynamics, love each other better. And I believe that this shift, this new renaissance from industrial and even the digital revolution to a wisdom era will be extraordinary. And my focus is really on the tech-enabled human potential of 500 years from now.
Something that you mentioned was this connectivity that you feel like is the driving force of opening.
That's a great question. And since I have 3 of them at home, I want them to play and follow their curiosity and activate their imagination and pursue wonder. At the same time, to be an intentional leader is to understand that you're part of the whole of society, that we are all connected, so whatever you do may have a ripple effect to other people. So if you can do the joy and the playfulness, the imagination, with an understanding that we're all one, I think that you can be an intentional leader for tomorrow.
Thank you so much.